This is G&G's new ESG B10, or Evolution Shotgun Bullpup 10. Now, it's not really a big secret that this is the spiritual replacement for another bullpup shotgun that a certain company completely failed to deliver on. Hopefully, this G&G shotgun doesn't receive too much flack for it. It's powered by green gas loaded into the internal reservoir, feeds from an AEG midcap, and spits out 5 or 10 shots per trigger pull. The kicker? It's selling for under $470 Canadian, which in this current market is an absolute bargain, especially considering the other shotgun I mentioned was going for nearly double that before post-pandemic pricing was even a thing. These are due to arrive in June, but we're only able to secure a limited quantity, so if you want to lock yours down, pre-orders are available now on our website. The ESG B10 is a non-blowback gas system, so gas only serves to propel the BB, meaning gas efficiency is excellent with more than 200 trigger pulls, or depending on what mode you're shooting in, 1,000 to 2,000 BBs worth of gas in the reservoir. The trade-off though is the trigger pull does the entire job of a traditional blowback bolt system, so the trigger feel suffers, but more on that in a bit. Taking a look at the externals, it's very in line with G&G's aesthetic with a futuristic look and a mixture of geometric and curvy lines. There are some G&G staples like random little holes and angular cuts in the handguard, which continues onto the dust cover and magazine release. As far as I know, it's not based on a real firearm design, but certainly looks fitting to a sort of plausible future weapon from a video game. Bullpups can be pretty polarizing in terms of looks, but in my opinion, this is a relatively unoffensive look. I think G&G did a pretty good job. The lower receiver is polymer in G&G's usual matte textured polymer, which is not a bad thing. It feels really good to the touch. Upper receiver, which is most of the front end, is metal, including the carrying handle and outer barrel. Even with all that metal up front though, because of the heavy internals in the back, the balance is still quite biased towards the rear, with the balance point a little bit behind the pistol grip. Hold it in one hand and it will pull a wheelie on you. Nothing unusual for the bullpup enthusiast, but it might be somewhat of an adjustment if you've never ran one. Looking down the barrel, you can see the outer barrel is just a metal sleeve, and the inner barrel doesn't even come close to reaching the front of the gun, which is not all too surprising, I guess, from a gun designed to have a large spread. Front handguard is a bit chunky to accommodate the thick barrel, especially compared to a slim AR rail, but is otherwise pretty comfortable to hold. It's got 3.5 M-LOK slots on either side, and a plastic cover hides a standard pick rail underneath. The carry handle is a chunk of metal and feels really solid. With 3 screws, it can be removed, which might be a worthwhile weight savings, especially as the nature of this gun doesn't really require sights. Though it does come with a single fiber optic front sight up front that you line up with the channel. However, getting a low enough cheek weld is a bit tough, especially as there is a rise to the cheek piece due to the mechanism inside. There's sort of a bevel cut near the pistol grip, which slims down the gun, which definitely makes the gun feel a little less chunky. Without it, it would definitely feel like holding a box. The pistol grip itself is identical to G&G's other gas guns and is a touch slim for my liking, but otherwise does the job nicely. Glad to see it is replaceable though and can store extra whatever you can fit in there. Butt pad is made of a hard plastic with a nice texture that grips the shoulder well, which is important for such a back heavy gun. Your typical metal quick release mounting points, 2 at the back and 2 in the front for all your slinging needs. Pulling back on the biohazard adorned charging handle reveals a bit of the internals, and there is a bolt hold open function. You can see that the mech box, so to speak, is a solid chunk of metal, which accounts for that rearward weight bias. The bolt handle itself can be moved to the other side, but it's really more for looks than function. What looks something like a hop-up adjustment is actually the mechanism that holds the BBs in the chamber. There is no hop-up system in this shotgun. Taking a look at the mag release, you can see it somewhat resembles an AR mag latch, but with a large metal piece that extends down to the bottom. It actually works really intuitively, and hitting it anywhere along the bottom pops out the mag easily. The magazine is a standard G&G AR AEG mag, and if you're not familiar with their extended follower, it basically pushes all the BBs up into the chamber, unlike normal magazines which always leave a few unspent rounds. Just make sure when it's unloaded to push the follower all the way down before inserting it into the gun. With the mag out, we can take a closer look at the magazine release, which is fully ambidextrous with a hinge system. It feels solid and both sides feel really good to operate. When inserting the mag, don't be fooled by the first click. It actually takes a little bit of force to properly seat. G&G tends to have a stiffer mag insert, and although a bit tricky at first, tends to break in well. Magazine play once inserted in is excellent. Bigger issue to me is because the release is so big, I hit it a few times by accident just maneuvering around the heavy rear end. User error, of course, but something to be mindful of. Overall though, the magazine system does work very well. Looking at the selector switch, it has G&G's usual quite notchy selector, which I've always been a fan of. Feels good to use on both sides of the gun. Instead of semi and full auto, this gun has 5-shot and 10-shot mode. It's worth mentioning that if you go into 10-shot and then back to 5-shot mode, the extra 5 BBs will already be in the chamber and the first trigger pull will still be 10 shots and then 5 shots for the rest. Onto the trigger pull, it's a straight pull, bullpup, non-blowback trigger, so I'm really not expecting a fantastic feel. There is quite a bit of travel with a long take-up and lack of a distinct wall. Brake itself is relatively light, but is a little squishy. At least there's barely any over travel after the brake. Reset is near the beginning of travel and does have a nice notchy click to it. Like other non-blowbacks, the trigger is doing almost all of the work cycling, so with that in mind, it's really not a bad trigger. Just be realistic with your expectations. Onto the range now, we start by gassing up the reservoir. I only gave it about 8 seconds or so, but it was still enough to do all of our testing without a refill. The beauty of non-blowback efficiency. The mid-cap magazine, of course, loads up like any AEG magazine. You might want to have spare mags though, as this thing depletes a full mag in as little as 12 trigger pulls. Pushing off safe, you can hear the BBs being chambered in. 5 shots first. The spread is pretty perfect for CQB. Wider than a real shotgun spread, of course, but about torso size at most CQB distances. Surprisingly consistent too, hitting the center target almost every time. Even with that longer trigger pull, it's still pretty easy to double tap thanks to that nice notchy reset. Switching to 10-shot mode now, you can hear another 5 rounds loaded into the chamber. Spread gets noticeably wider, and of course velocity does drop trying to push 10 BBs at once. Personally, I'd probably just run 5-shot mode for a little bit more range. Here we can see when switching to 10-shot and back to 5, the first shot is still 10 shots. Not really an issue, of course, but something to be aware of. Now let's see how quickly I can dump a whole mag in 10-shot mode. Yeah, that's a lot of rounds downrange. Unfortunately, being a non-blowback, there's no bolt lock when empty, but of course, you can easily tell when you're dry. Alright, let's talk final thoughts on the ESG B10. I can certainly see this thing being very effective on the field, maybe even a little overpowered if I'm going to be honest, at least at short ranges. Just make sure to confirm that it's legal at your local field. It's somewhat of a niche product for sure, but I think anyone can appreciate sending a wall of BBs downrange. I'm just glad to see more unique guns that are actually reliable and field ready. At this price point, I could definitely see a fire team having one of these as a situational tool exclusively for room clearing. Let us know what you think in the comments. Novelty toy or potential game changer? As always, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you feel like it, and I'll catch you on the next one.